I was asked this morning if I would share a testimony of God's incredible goodness to myself and my family. I was humbled, and at the same time I was excited about the opportunity to do this. The last time I shared my testimony and my family was here, I realized long after I had finished that I had failed to introduce them. So I don't want to make that mistake twice. So I'm grateful this morning to have Linda, my wife, with me this morning, and Ruth and Rachel are here this morning as well. They're not as bold. I'd like to start this morning, if I can, by reading for you a psalm. The psalm is Psalm 40, verse 3, and you'll understand in a few minutes why this psalm has significant meaning to me. He has given me a new song to sing, a hymn of praise to our God. Many will see what he has done and be astounded. They will turn their hearts towards him. My name, I said earlier, is Rick. My notes say that I'm 46 years old, but that changed a few days ago. So now I'm 47 years old. And on December 16th, I experienced what the doctors refer to as cardiac death. And I'd like to tell you my brief story, and then I'd like to share with you what God is and has taught me as a result of this experience. I've learned since that less than 10% of the people who have the kind of heart attack that I had actually live. It was a Saturday morning, and as I often do, I went to work for a few hours to do what I refer to as some light maintenance, maybe some vacuuming, maybe a little bit of cleaning, making sure that the office looked good for the following Monday. And I began to feel what I thought was symptoms of a bad cold. That morning I had taken some vitamins, I had drank my cup of coffee or two, and that was it. I hadn't eaten anything else, so I said, man, I'm maybe getting a chest cold or a bad case of heartburn or whatever it is, but that's all I thought. I stayed at work for a little bit longer, and I said, man, this is really weird. I began to sweat a little bit, and this heartburn that I experienced heartburn on a fairly frequent basis, and I thought that's what I'm experiencing. Well, it wouldn't go away, and I said, no, I know what it is. I'm getting the flu, I'm getting a bad cold. So I said, I'm just going to go home and lay down for a while and just wait this out. Well, as I was driving home that morning down Butterfield Road on the way home, I really was getting sweaty. And so I stopped the car along Butterfield Road, rolled down the windows, let some cold air blow in, and felt a little bit better. So I continued home, and I got home that morning, and you're going to hear in my story what I can see today as some very specific examples of God's orchestrating events in my life so that I can give my testimony this morning. But as I got home, that morning Ruth was not supposed to be home, but she was, because she had some high school girls over for breakfast. I was coughing, I got sick in the driveway. I said, man, I know that I'm getting the flu. So I said, sweetheart, I got to go upstairs. Dad's not feeling good. Maybe you can come up in a few minutes and just check on me. Well, as God would orchestrate events, she didn't wait more than 5 or 6 minutes to come upstairs. And came upstairs 3 or 4 minutes, and I was laying on the bed, and she looked at me. She said, Dad, I'm calling 911. She didn't ask me how I was feeling. She didn't say, Dad, should I call 911? She said, Dad, I'm calling 911. And at that point, you often hear of heart attacks, it's like an elephant. I've heard people say it's like an elephant sitting on your chest, or there's incredible pain that goes down your left shoulder and down your arm. Well, I wasn't experiencing any of that. I was sweating. I didn't have any shortness of breath. And so later I asked Ruth why. she called 911 so quickly. She said, "Dad, it was the color of your skin." Well, I obviously hadn't checked out the color of my skin, but the technicians arrived in less than 8 minutes to my house. One of the lead technician had been doing what he's doing for more than 20 years. And they put all the gizmos on my chest and asked me all these questions and gave me some nitroglycerin and a few baby aspirin, and instantly the pressure went away. I felt fine. I said, "Great. You know, they know what they're doing. This isn't a big deal. Everything's going to be." I walked down the stairs. They said, "We'd like to take you to the hospital anyway." So I walked down the stairs. I laid on the stretcher that they had at the front door, and they wheeled me out into the ambulance. Have any of you ever had an ambulance ride? I've always wondered what it would be like. In fact, I got into the ambulance, and this pressure started to come back. And they said, on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate the pressure? I said, well, probably a 6, maybe a 7. It's a pain level. And they gave me some more nitroglycerin, and we were on our way to the hospital. Ruth was with us, and I said to Ruth later, I said, "Ruth, did they have the lights going?" Because I couldn't remember if the lights and the siren were going. Because if I was ever going to ride an ambulance, I wanted both of those things. Most of you that live here in Wheaton know the challenge and the patience that God teaches us with the trains, right? Well, we went down Winfield Road going north, and guess what? No train. Crossed the railroad tracks, pulled in, I guess, to where the ambulances pull in at the hospital. And the last thing I remember, they took me out of the ambulance. I said, "What's going on?" I remember them saying, "Sir, you may be having a heart attack." Well, I remember them wheeling me into the emergency room doors, and something about roommate. And that was the last thing I remember. At that point, Linda had arrived at the hospital. She had been out that morning. Ruth was in the ambulance with me, and my mom and dad had just returned from Florida for Christmas. And so Ruth apparently had called them from the ambulance as well. And they were all there. Well, they wheeled me into the hospital, said roommate, and then I experienced what full cardiac arrest. What Linda and Ruth, mom and dad, described it as, they said that my body stiffened, my eyes rolled into the back of my head, and I began to have what they referred to as seizures, and I was gone. So are you keeping track? Ruth was home. There was no train. When I experienced my cardiac arrest, I was in the hospital doors. Number 4, the guy who was my cardiologist was at that point literally walking down the hallway. And they did an angioplasty, an angiogram, and they put a stent in. And from that point on, I was recovering. Did I tell you how old I was? I'm 47 years old. I never expected that I would have an opportunity to stand in front of a group like this and testify to God's life-saving mercy in my life. But here I am. There are typically 4 common risk factors that people say you have or make you a likely candidate for a heart attack. They include weight, diabetes, genetics, which could include heart disease in the family, cholesterol, and perhaps high blood pressure. And the 4th one is stress. I heard the nurse say in the recovery unit, she told another nurse that this guy shouldn't be here. He doesn't have any of those risk factors in his life. Well, the one she's not aware of and couldn't see in my life was stress. And so if we've tried to identify specifically what the cause, what what made my heart have this, the blockage. It wasn't blockage that was caused by plaque building up. It was simply a small piece of soft plaque that broke off. And from the point that I now know was my first symptoms to death was only an hour and a half. So it wasn't due to narrowing of the arteries or things like that. So we've identified probably the primary reason for my heart attack as being stress. Before I go any further this morning, the other reason that I'm a bit humbled to be in front of this group is by the number of you that either called my home and said some kind things to Linda or our voice machine, or sent cards or sent flowers. As I said earlier, it's been 4 or 5 years since Linda and I were in this Sunday school class. And we were overwhelmed to know that after that period of time, that so many people from here still cared about us. Apparently, there were a number of you that were praying as we were going through this period of time. So I did not want to miss an opportunity this morning to say thank you for caring after such a long period of time. Now I'd like to take a few minutes and share with you some of the things that God has been teaching Linda and I through this experience. First of all, and very practically, and absolutely no spiritual relevance to my first question, will be, is your personal house in order? On the morning of December 16th, I had absolutely no idea that I was going to have the experience that I did on that morning. But because of some people that are involved in our lives and have given us some good wisdom, things like health insurance, things like life insurance, things like a will and so forth, were all in place. And as a result of the experience that I've had and the health issues, I'm far more susceptible today to having another heart attack than if I hadn't had one before. And so things like health insurance and life insurance, it's a good thing I have the policies that I do and I don't have to go look for those now. So my first question to you this morning again, are those things taken care of for you this morning? Secondly, my second question is, how is your will? Not the kind of will I was just talking about, but how is your will? In Romans 7:15, Paul is struggling with his will to do what God wants him to do against what his flesh wants to do. He says, I do not understand what I do, for what I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate to do, I do. I'm learning right now in a very real world way, on a tangible level, what that means to me. The doctor has identified that for a minimum of 220 minutes every week, my heart has to beat at the top of my target heart range in order to begin to reverse some of the heart disease that I have to tell you this morning that I have. And prior to December 16th, I knew that exercise, etc., was important, but I didn't like it. I don't know if I used the word hate, but it was close. The nurse at one point said to me, asked me if I exercise regularly. I said, no, I said, I'm really active. She said, no, Mr. Armstrong, do you exercise regularly? I've correlated my struggle with exercise to my flesh. Every single day, when I have to go exercise, I don't want to go. But I also have a will. And I've had to learn that my will has to be stronger than my flesh. Because if it isn't, I am not going to continue to exercise. Guys, I've heard the example before. Do you remember when you were dating your wives? I don't know about you, but I've heard the example before that it's kind of like a hunt, right? We're out, we've got kind of a goal in mind. We think that we found the right woman for us. And then what happens? We get married, and what? The hunt's over. Well, for me, the hunt is just about over as it relates to this part of my recovery. I've just about attained, I got 3 pounds to go. I've just about attained the weight loss goal. But the thing that scares me more than anything is that my will remain strong after I've accomplished my goal. Most people who have had heart attacks, statistically, return within months to their pre-heart attack lifestyle and disciplines. So on a daily basis, I recently wrote this in my journal, on a daily basis, I'm reminded because of this struggle, I'm reminded that I'm reminded about this battle of flesh and will / God's will for our lives. That I'm talking about just a really relatively simple thing of exercise. But I'm reminded daily of that battle that's going on inside us. Pastor's sermon this morning was excellent as it related to thinking about the battle of good and evil. God wants to win. God wants my heart, my soul. But Satan also does. And this process of exercising my will on a regular basis reminds me of that battle that's going on and of the need that I have personally, as spiritually as well as physically, to stay true to God.